Most shipwrecks disappear completely. They go down, the ocean closes over them, and that's it. Gone forever. A name on a memorial somewhere and nothing else. You'd need a submersible, a dive team, sometimes thousands of feet of freezing dark water just to lay eyes on them. But not all of them. Some wrecks never finished sinking. Some are still half in the world, sitting right where anyone can walk up and look at them. No scuba gear required. One of them is still leaking oil into the water. It sank in more than 80 years ago. One is sitting in a British river right now, loaded with enough live explosives to flatten a town. Another one is rusting quietly, where a train passes within a few hundred feet of it, and almost nobody on board even notices. And one of them survived being hit by an actual atomic bomb. Twice, and still refused to disappear completely. These are 5 shipwrecks you can see today without ever going underwater. Ship 1, the USS Arizona, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. On the morning of December the 7th, 1941, the USS Arizona had about 13 minutes left to exist as a fighting ship. A Japanese armor-piercing bomb came down through the forward deck and detonated the ship's ammunition magazine. The explosion was so violent it threw a fireball nearly 800 feet into the air above the harbour. 1,177 of her crew were killed in that single moment, more than any other ship lost that day. The Arizona settled into about 40 feet of water and never moved again. Most of her crew were never recovered, and they're still inside her right now. Here's the part that makes this one different from almost every other wreck on this list. The Arizona is not fully submerged. Parts of her are still above the waterline today, more than 8 decades later. The barbette of one of her gun turrets still pokes up out of the harbour. The American flag is raised and lowered over her every single day because the US Navy has never decommissioned her. As far as the Navy is concerned, the USS Arizona is still in active commission, sitting exactly where she sank. And she has never stopped marking that morning in another way. Up to 9 quarts of oil still rise from the wreck every single day, drop by drop, spreading into dark rainbow slicks on the surface of the harbour. Sailors have a name for it, the Black Tears of the Arizona. A memorial was built directly over the hull in 1962, designed to straddle the wreck without ever touching it. Today, more than 1 million people a year make the short boat trip out to stand above her and look straight down through clear Hawaiian water at what's still resting underneath them. But the next wreck on this list is, in a strange way, even more dangerous than the Arizona. Because the Arizona's bomb already went off decades ago. This next one never did. Ship 2, the SS Richard Montgomery, Thames Estuary, England. About 1.5 miles off the coast of Sheerness in Kent, 3 rusted masts stick up out of the water. They've been sticking up there since 1944. Beneath them, sitting on the floor of the Thames Estuary right now, there are roughly 1,400 tons of live Second World War ordnance, 500-pound bombs, cluster munitions, fragmentation bombs, fuses. All of it still down there, all of it still potentially live, in water only 24 feet deep, less than a mile from an English town. The Richard Montgomery was an American Liberty ship, hauling more than 6,000 tons of munitions toward the Normandy beaches, when she dragged her anchor in August 1944 and ran herself aground on a sandbank. The hull split open, water poured in, and salvage crews raced to pull as much of the cargo out as they could before she went under completely. They lost the race. By the time she settled, they had managed to recover only about half of what was on board. The rest simply stayed where it was, and it's still there. Today, those 3 masts break the surface at every state of the tide, a permanent, almost eerie landmark on the horizon. There's a permanent exclusion zone around the wreck, warning notices bolted directly onto the masts, and round-the-clock radar surveillance watching the site. For decades, experts have argued over what would actually happen if the Montgomery ever detonated. The most alarming estimates describe a blast capable of throwing a column of water 3,000 metres into the sky and sending a wave rolling up the Thames toward London itself. The British government has been wrestling with what to do about it for roughly 80 years now, and in April of 2026, they finally signed a contract, not to remove the explosives, but to remove the masts, after engineers concluded that the deteriorating structures could eventually collapse onto the munitions below them. The 1,400 tons of live ordnance stays exactly where it is. 3 rusted masts in the Thames Estuary, Still standing, still loaded, still waiting. The next wreck on this list is quieter than the Montgomery, in every sense. Most visitors to Pearl Harbor walk right past it without ever realizing it's there. Ship 3, the USS Utah, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Almost everyone who visits Pearl Harbor knows the Arizona. Almost nobody crosses over to the far side of Ford Island, where a second battleship has been sitting since the very same morning. The Utah was hit by 2 torpedoes in the opening minutes of the attack, capsized, and sank within roughly 12 minutes. 58 men were killed, most of them trapped below, as the ship rolled over on top of them. An attempt was made to right the Utah in 1943, using the same heavy salvage equipment that had successfully rolled the USS Oklahoma back upright. The Utah began to move, then slid sideways and settled at an angle on the harbour floor instead. The Navy abandoned the effort. The Utah had no real military value left to recover, and righting her properly simply wasn't worth the cost. Today, her overturned hull still protrudes above the waterline on the western shore of Ford Island, tilted at roughly 38 degrees, her crew still inside her. You need military or government identification just to get onto Ford Island, which is exactly why most tourists never see her. There's no gleaming white memorial here, no million visitors a year. Just a small platform on the shoreline with a plaque, and behind it, the rusting hull of a battleship breaking the surface of the harbour. The forgotten ship of Pearl Harbor. And if the Utah is forgotten, the next wreck on this list is almost completely unknown outside of the handful of people who've actually gone looking for it. You can find this one by looking out the window of a train in the Arctic north of Norway. Ship 4, the Z2 Georg Thiele, Rombaksfjord, Norway. Deep inside a Norwegian fjord, ringed by mountains and freezing water, a section of rusted orange metal breaks the surface. Most people who glimpse it from the train have no idea what they're looking at. It's the bow of the Georg Thiele, a German destroyer that fought in the battles of Narvik in April 1940 and has been sitting in that fjord ever since. On April the 13th, 1940, the Georg Thiele was the very last German destroyer still fighting at Narvik. The other 9 had already been sunk or disabled by British warships. The Georg Thiele covered their retreat alone, engaging British ships long after she had any real chance of surviving the encounter. She was hit again and again, fires broke out across the ship, her ammunition was almost gone. Her captain made the call to run her straight onto the rocks of Rombaksfjord at full speed, deliberately grounding her hard enough that the crew could scramble off onto the shore rather than go down with the ship. She broke in two and capsized. The stern settled on the floor of the fjord at a depth of about 52 metres. The bow stayed exactly where it ran aground. It's still there today, rusting quietly against the fjord wall, visible from the railway line that runs between Narvik and the Swedish border. A 30-minute walk from the nearest road brings you close enough to see it clearly. The ship's bell was recovered long ago and now sits in a museum nearby. The rest of her will stay in that fjord until the water finally finishes the job it started in 1940. But the last wreck on this list makes even the Georg Thiele look almost ordinary by comparison. Because this warship didn't just survive the Second World War, it survived the atomic bomb twice. Ship 5, the Prinz Eugen, Kwajalein Atoll, Marshall Islands. By the time the war ended in 1945, the German heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen had already lived through more than most warships ever face in a lifetime. She was present at the sinking of HMS Hood. She made the legendary Channel dash past the entire Royal Navy. She bombarded Allied positions on the Eastern Front. She struck a mine, survived being torpedoed, and kept fighting regardless. Of all the major German surface warships of the Second World War, the Prinz Eugen was one of the very few that never sank. When Germany surrendered, the US Navy took her as a war prize and sailed her halfway around the world to the Pacific. In July of 1946, she was anchored at Bikini Atoll as a target ship for Operation Crossroads, America's nuclear weapons testing program. 2 atomic bombs were detonated in her immediate vicinity. Both times, the Prinz Eugen survived. She came out of it radioactive but structurally intact, a result that genuinely baffled the American engineers studying her. The Navy had no real idea what to do with a contaminated German cruiser that simply refused to sink. They towed her to Kwajalein, where a small leak eventually developed below her waterline. Because of the radiation contamination, nobody could safely get close enough to repair it. the leak slowly grew larger. On December the 22nd, 1946, more than a year after the war in Europe had ended, the Prinz Eugen finally capsized and sank in the shallow lagoon off the island of Enubuge, brought down at last not by gunfire, not by torpedoes, not by an atomic bomb, but by a leak nobody could fix in time. One of her enormous bronze propellers was salvaged in 1979 and shipped home to Germany, where it stands today outside the Lebo Naval Memorial near Kiel. A massive bronze blade from a ship that survived everything the 20th century could throw at her. The wreck itself remains partially visible above the waterline at Kwajalein to this day, lying on her side, propellers still breaking the surface, still refusing to fully disappear. So that's the list. 5 warships sitting in plain sight on 3 different oceans, none of them requiring a single breath underwater to sea. The Arizona still mourns her crew every day, drop by drop. The Richard Montgomery still sits loaded, still waiting, watched around the clock. The Utah rusts quietly where almost nobody bothers to look. The Georg Thiele rests against a fjord wall, visible for 30 seconds from a passing train window. And the Prinz Eugen survived a world war and 2 nuclear detonations only to be beaten, in the end, by a crack nobody fixed in time. They were all built for war. Most ships like them never made it home at all. These 5 never fully left either. They're still out there right now, above the waterline in plain sight, carrying everything they carried back then. Some wars end with a treaty, some end with a shipwreck, and some, it turns out, never really end at all. Now, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, let me know in the comments, and I'll keep making more of these. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you next time.